We at Technically talk a lot about remote and distributed teams. We'll do that again soon. But today, a little bit of poetry for the office to remind you what's great and grand about what could still be. Today on Culture Builder Live. Hey, I am Chris Wink. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Technically, a news organization that has grown a community of technology professionals. This is Culture Builder Live, where we talk about building better companies. And I'm so excited to have Claire Rutkowski, the Chief Information Officer from Bentley Systems, joining me for the conversation today. Claire, Bentley Systems, 4,500 people, publicly traded as of last year, an infrastructure engineering company based in Exton, Pennsylvania, but more than 100 offices. So we're going to talk about the office today. First, though, Claire, I do a lot of conversations with CIOs for Technically, but in this space, talking about building better companies, it's not often the CIO who I'm talking to. So why am I talking to Bentley's CIO? Would you tip me off on that? And pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. So I think a lot of CIOs are very comfortable in the technical space, talking about technology. I'm kind of more of a non-technical CIO. So I'm one of those people that I don't feel like I have to have all the answers. I just have to know the people to call who have the answers. And I think for me, my priority is running a great team. And embedded in that is making sure that we are doing the right thing as leaders by supporting our colleagues and by doing everything we can to make sure that they feel happy, they feel secure in their job, they feel like they have a safe space so that they can then be productive. I think productivity as an end in and of itself, okay, you can get that. You can get that any number of ways, but why not get it by, if you make sure that people feel happy and trusted and supported, that comes anyway. Productivity will come, motivation will come, engagement will come. And so I'm really on a mission to see companies treat their colleagues in the best way they possibly can, because the results will come then.
A CIO talking about happiness. I in work, no less. I like it. So we are technically doing a lot of breathless coverage of the move to remote and distributed. I think that's probably easiest at a smaller company size. Bentley has 100 offices around the world, offices in China and
All over.
yeah, quite widespread. So I guess, like, when you're seeing this coverage of remote push, some of the numbers we're looking at will still end up 70% of companies with some hybrid environment, maybe 20% of professional companies end up in a mostly remote or remote first environment, and 10% being fully 5 days a week office space. That's some of the McKinsey numbers. Is there only one version of the future of work? Do we all end up distributed over time and all the office stuff is just old tradition? Or do you think something lingers about the office for the long term?
I think it depends. Well, the short answer is no. There is no one future of work. But I think that's because it really depends on the size of the company, as you mentioned, the company culture, how geographically dispersed the company's offices or people already are. I do think there will be many different futures of work. I know of some companies that are mandating return to the office for uh, all staff. And some that are saying, you know what, we're just never going to have an office again because it's an expense we don't need. And others are saying, yeah, you know what, we're going to go hybrid and we're going to give people a choice. And even within the hybrid world, there are different types of hybrid. There's hybrid
Right.
that's like, do whatever you want. There's hybrid that's come in 1 day a week. There's hybrid that's come in 3 days a week. I don't care what they are. There's hybrid that's like come in 3 days a week and they have to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we're all coming in on the same day. So I think there's lots of different futures of work.
I'm one thing I'm stuck on in this, how this shakes out, the great turn the table moment we had over the last 15 months with offices. Um, so many companies we've covered who are at growth stage, um, and are intending to get to a larger number in this moment, let their employees disperse, or they started hiring across markets. Even we technically are finding that more of our clients, we help them hire from all of the cities we are in. Um, so I wonder if there's a difference here. Like Bentley, obviously, you grew up and grew teams around offices, so of course there's a strength in that office. Do you think there's a next generation of companies that post COVID still will have office priority?
Yeah, I think there are some companies that do have office priority because there are some benefits to working in an office, and we can talk about those. Uh, but I do think those companies prioritizing the presence in office presence will feel a hit because there have been a couple of recent studies done. Um, and they show, for instance, that a
Oh, you're
Robert
bringing the
Half.
receipts. I like this. You got reports out. I like this. You're coming with
I want
receipts,
to make
Claire.
sure I get the
I
numbers
like it.
right. Robert Half did a survey which reported that 34% of workers would rather quit than be told they have to be in an office full time.
Right.
And the Business Insider did a similar one that showed 40% would leave. So I think that a lot of people are really expecting remote working, but I still think there will be companies that place the priority on being in the office.
So then get me to it. Yeah. Will offices still work in the future for this the next generation of Bentley Systems companies that want to go public 10 years from now, where right now they have relatively distributed offices post COVID? Are they still going to come back to the office? The offices still work?
I think offices will work, but they will work differently. Um, Now, again, I do think there'll be some stalwarts, that will say, "Nope, this is it. We're going this way." But I think they'll find they have empty space, and they will have to shift. I think that offices are going to become much more hybrid in purpose themselves. So there will be some offices and cubes for hoteling arrangements and for, the traditionalists that really want to go into the office, or for those roles which really do work better in an office. But I think the majority of the office space will be developed more for purposeful collaboration. So there'll be a lot more meeting rooms, a lot more conference rooms, a lot more open spaces with couches and booths and different things so that we're encouraging that spontaneous collaboration as well as providing enough space for when people really do want to get together, there's adequate meeting space and so on.
What What do you love about the office?
So, in the interest of full disclosure, I work in the office. Um,
Yeah, you don't look like you're in office right now.
no, I'm definitely not in an office right
Yeah.
now, and I haven't actually been in an office since the pandemic began.
Right.
Pre-pandemic, I worked in an office, maybe one out of every 3 weeks, one out of every 4 weeks, and I would work the
Mm,
whole week in the office and then have a couple of weeks um, at home. Uh, so I've been hybrid all along since, like,
right.
well, I'm not even going to tell you since when, but a really long time. So, so for me, I can see the benefits of both worlds, right? I do think the office has a lot of benefits that we need to bear in mind. So a lot of drive-bys happen in the office, right? People swinging by your cube or office, or people that you see when you're getting a cup of coffee. And in those moments of drive-bys, first of all, there's the building of trust because you get to ask people, what did you do over the weekend? What you got any good plans? What are you doing tonight? So those little conversations incrementally build trust, and they do it much more quickly than we're able to do remotely. And the other thing about those drive-by conversations is sometimes they are the spark of innovation where somebody thinks, hey, you know what, that's a great idea. I could take it and apply it to this other thing. So I think that the drive-bys and the accidental serendipitous conversations are definitely advantages to being in the office. Uh, and I think the other thing is that the culture of the company is easily felt and communicated and sort of adapted when you are
Mm.
working in an office consistently. It's just easier to communicate. Like onboarding someone right now, if they're remote, is really hard because they
Mm.
don't get that feel for the culture of the office. The other thing about being in the office is you can much more quickly and easily sense if someone's having a bad day, and
Hmm.
maybe need some support or just a pat on the shoulder or, hey, are you all right? If you're remote, unless you specifically have a meeting with that person that day, you might miss that moment completely. And I think that's also important. Other things that are important have to do with your career, right? Because if your boss is in the office, then if you're in the office, you will get more face time with your boss.
And that's a
It's going to happen.
controversial, right? No, I think that actually that one is that's one that pops up a bunch in conversations of like, I imagine that must be difficult at an office like Bentley if you have 100 offices. There's a lot of dynamics that take place, and so one of the pushes I've heard from founders and HR folk and distributed team leaders is if one person's hybrid, the value is let's all go hybrid. Or sorry, if one person's distributed, we're all distributed. And I'll say that this is a thing that I feel myself. We're only a team of 20, and I think there's something very different about different sized organizations. But we have an office with a lease in a building, and we hired people who are mostly a transit ride away. Um, and over the last year and a half, that has suddenly seemed a little silly to me at times, particularly because we have reporters in a bunch of different cities. So we already were also hybrid. Now suddenly it feels somewhat arbitrary. I think I felt through the years what you just described, Claire, that some of that opportunity to sense ups and downs and creative spark was just efficient when we could be in person. Um, it's efficient through inefficiency, I guess, if that makes sense. I think the what we find about offices, I don't know about you, but I've gone back to an office in the last year, it's almost felt foreign that right, I'm supposed to lose some time by talking to this person in the hallway, which is so different than what I've done for the last year and a half that has been Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call. There is
Oh,
no
yeah.
inefficiency. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm struggling though with whether some of that will sound incredibly archaic 15 years from now, 20 years from now, and people will say, "What are you talking about? Of course that was better. You guys were saying you preferred inefficiency." But you think there is something that can't quite, at least not yet, be recreated in an online environment.
Yeah, I think the spontaneity of those conversations cannot be recreated in a remote environment. It's very difficult. And the visibility is on the remote person to make sure that they are visible and they have a high enough profile, that people don't forget about them and they end up on the B team. That's bad, right?
Right.
And the other thing that I think is a real benefit to being in the office is purely from a mental health perspective, whether we realize it or not. um, Going to the office and coming back from the office creates a mental buffer between work and home. So you don't end up with this work home blur where you're on the computer all the time, you're worrying
Yeah.
about work, it's always there. It creates that chance to get your game face on and prepare for work, and then to unwind at the end of work. And you can do that working remotely, but you have to have a ritual about it, and you have to be very deliberate about it. So I do think from a mental health perspective, it forces that to happen without you really having to do anything extra or special.
There's a dynamic that you're hitting on also with office. Some of the research thinks points to the idea that for younger staff members or earlier career folk, that it can be particularly good because you build some of that discipline. And then it might, of course, there's exceptions. Of course, some people can build that. Of course, people have some discipline, but on the whole, it seems like it's a great opportunity to create that different distance. And then when you're a later career professional, it might be a lot easier for you to know that's my laptop over there, and I will touch it when I need to touch it, and over here I'm with the kids or reading or whatever I need to. I think that all makes sense to me. But some of them still for me, and that I'm struggling with. Some of them still feel like those are new skills we need to um, add. And does commercial real estate solve, is that too hulking a way to solve these many people problems? I'll put it like this. I'm very taken by this idea of Bentley Systems at 4,500 employees going public last year. There is so much office culture. So of course, like the teams have been built around it. It makes sense to me that for a large enough organization, an office makes sense. What I wonder though is we lose that on ramp. So we got an office when we were 8 to 10 employees, and then we're 20. And theoretically, as we grew, we would already be in an office. And then, then at some point it just makes sense. A lot of our people are geographically tied. And so it's more cost effective to have an office. An office makes financial sense at that point. If you break that apart, and as you grow, as a younger company, it's easier to go distributed. If we had started entirely distributed, would I never reach that point where I have enough geographic concentration to warrant an office?
Yeah,
And I
you probably
wondered,
wouldn't. That's an excellent point.
right.
You
So
probably
do we
wouldn't.
not, right. And so do we not end up having that next generation of Bentley Systems offices? Does that next generation, do we see that? That's my only challenge to the medium term or long term office
So
future.
I think, speaking for Bentley, we will still have offices, but we won't have as many offices,
Mm,
and we will have satellite offices that we will still have some satellite offices where there are concentrations of people, but we're going to be putting our emphasis on the hub offices, the office that it's really fun to go to because it's an energetic, purposely, fun place to be, right? That has all that space and the booths and the coffee bar kind of
right.
environment with
Well, how
lots of
many
comfort.
people do you need for that to make sense?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know of any studies that have been done. I would think you would need at least 100 if you're operating hybrid as well,
Yeah,
because not everyone's coming in every day.
right.
So you have to assume that you're maybe going to have, I mean, it depends, right? But you're maybe going to have 50, 60% occupancy at most on any given day.
We did a we're reporting on a story of many of these growth stage companies that had already had leases, and some of them are venture back, so they're not really bleeding money, but they now have these offices built for 50, 75, 100 people, and 7 people are going in on any given
Yep.
day. And then it obviously starts saying like, what the heck, do we lose? So I I want to, we got to wrap up here, but thank you for this little. Uh, this is something that I'm trying to wrap my head around in my own reporting of what the long tail of office culture is. But we're here to talk about why the office does make sense. I wonder if you want to send me off with a bit more of lessons from Bentley's own journey. You guys go public last year. You're a great story, a family-owned enterprise started in the '80s, early in software, infrastructure software, grown. Any lessons that you guys have had over the last year and a half about why you're going back to those hub offices of satellites? Do you know any of that math or
Yeah,
intelligence about?
because
Yeah, send us off with that.
there's always benefits to in-person collaboration that cannot be gained from remote collaboration. You can make remote collaboration work. You can make purposeful, efforts to schedule FaceTime with people and make sure that you're regularly checking in and having team meetings, but it's different because everybody is separate. If you can make the space for people to want to come in and have an in-person meeting, it's a whole different vibe. And so I think what we have to do as we look at hybrid models and returning to the office is acknowledge that everybody has their own story, everybody has their own issue, everyone has their own situation they're dealing with. So let's not make people do things they don't want to do. But let's make the office so appealing and so much fun that people do want to go in a couple of days a week just to like check in with their teammates or to go to a quarterly meeting or once a week, whatever it is. Let's make the space for that to happen because
Mm,
that's just as valid. And in some cases, people don't have, they live in a smaller home. Maybe there's multi generations living in that home. Maybe they don't want to work at home. We assume that everybody wants to work at home, but that's not
right.
true. 10%
Yes.
of people want to be full time in the office, and 70% of people want to be hybrid. So they do want that presence in the office and the chance to make the choice. So I
And
think
that's right.
offices will still always have a place. It's
Yeah, they
just
just
going to be
evolve.
different.
Yeah, I think the point of flexibility and responsiveness to employee is the right way to go. Claire Rutkowski, Chief Information Officer of Bentley Systems, thanks so much for your time. This has been Culture Builder Live. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you.